Hey everybody, and welcome to the PC Gamer Show. My name is Tom Marks, assistant editor here at PC Gamer. With me today is Mr. Evan Lottie, editor-in-chief. I got the beats mixed up there. How you doing, Evan?
Tom, I get called a lot of things on the internet, but it's the first time I've heard that one.
Lottie?
Yeah.
Well, it won't be the last. Also with us today is James Davenport, associate editor. How you doing, James?
Good.
AKA Doom Guy.
Yeah, I was gonna.
You are Doom Guy.
For a moment there, I was formulating a joke where I don't say anything because I'm silent. I'm the silent protagonist of this podcast. But I don't think that would work too well.
No.
No.
Unless we could, I don't think we can
grunt.
show your hand motions to the podcast listeners,
That's
you know,
true.
and just communicate through that.
First-person podcast.
Fist bumping little versions of yourself and all that. Is that why you're in green too? You got the
Yeah, I just feel it. I feel it.
Well, we got a great show for you today, as always, as we do every week. This week we'll be talking about Stellaris, which is the grand strategy game from Paradox that a lot of us came out last week, but a lot of us have been playing last weekend and week. We'll also be discussing the Assassin's Creed movie trailer, along with the Overwatch short films and kind of the different ways video games can be movies and stuff like that, and also the hilarity that is the Assassin's Creed movie having pre-order bonuses. But more on that later, and we'll also be discussing the big topic today, Doom, which came out on Friday. James, you've been playing for review. Mm-hmm. I've been playing for silly snap map stuff. And we'll just jump into the goods and the bads of that, because I think there are plentiful amounts of both. But overall, just as a preview, enjoying it, right?
Yeah, quite a bit.
Good. Well, of course, we'll be ending the show with taking your questions from Twitch chat. But first, let's talk about what we've been playing lately. This is going to be a little bit of a different, or a more dangerous now playing for me and James, because I feel like the answer to me and James is Stellaris and Doom. So let's start with you, Evan.
Sure.
You told me about a very exciting thing before this started.
Oh, God. I'm going to reveal myself as what kind of gamer I am in comparison to some other great games. But Stardew Valley is a great game, and I put 60 hours in the Stardew Valley with my girlfriend, I might add. And we're playing it sort of like old school, what I would call old school Doom style, where one of us holds the mouse and the other person holds WSAD, even though that's not how you control Doom. Anyway, I got married in Stardew Valley last night. That was very exciting. Penny was my selected wife. And
good catch.
That's the bookworm?
she's really into reading, and she tutors children in the town.
Right.
She's a very noble, hardworking lady. So yeah, just enjoying that. I think one of the things that strikes me about Stardew Valley, again, 60 hours in, it's a terrifically charming game. I think the experience of passive accumulation in that game is weirdly satisfying, where you plant stuff in the ground and you just see it slowly grow up, and you get an eggplant and put it in the thing that makes the eggplant pickled, and then you get more money from it. At the root of it, you see that stuff in a lot of other games where you're just accumulating stuff in the background, and the pleasure of that. SimCity is a good example, or stuff is kind of leveling up and growing in the background. So yeah, I think I'm certainly kind of reaching the edge or the crust of that game in terms of depth. I think not all of its sort of systems or sections are as deep as others. The mines are probably one of the richer areas of the game. Farming is fairly deep, but some of the systems like marriage and relationships are fairly shallow. So looking forward to further updates of that game. Probably going to put it down pretty soon, now that I've tied the knot. And
there's it's got a lot of content updates already, specifically about marriage. We talked previously about how he made the marriage candidates kind of more like people once they became married, because usually they would just get married and turn into mindless zombies, essentially.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
Which is a weird social commentary to have. But yeah, he also the creator talked about how he wanted to make the mines more of a deeper experience, how he wanted them to be deeper. I didn't mean that, but oh God, moving on, James. But yeah, he's got a lot of ideas clearly about kind of where he wants to make the game deeper, and that's cool to see that he wants to keep going with it, especially because he announced that he's going to be doing all of the content updates himself. He's going to be getting assistance on porting the game to consoles, and then also adding co-op to the game. but he's going to still be doing all the content. But man, I'm excited for co-op Stardew Valley.
I mean, it's his decision to make, and I won't criticize him for wanting to have sole ownership for the most part over the content of this game that he spent 4 years with. I can definitely respect that. But also, like, part of me is like, oh man, if we just put like 3 more people on this game, there would be so much more stuff we'd get sooner. And I don't know.
No, I feel you. I feel you. It's easy to look at something like Terraria is a really good comparison, where they have a whole team and it still takes them a really long time to put out these granted massive content updates. But even that, I'm going to be jumping back into Terraria actually, hopefully next week, because they're releasing their 1.3.1 update, which is the first major update they've done since the 1.3 huge content update that was the final update that the creator of the game was working on personally, and now he's gone to other projects within the company. So I'm excited to jump back into Terraria. I just love games like that, little pixely, like, progression-based games. They're my kryptonite. So James, what have you been playing besides Doom and Stellaris?
Yeah, I've taken up most of my time, but again, I hop into Dark Souls on occasion. I've been helping out Tim, our global editor-in-chief, from time to time, and kind of teaching him the ways. Yeah, it's funny, the experience we've had together. It reminds me of, like, or what I would imagine it's like to teach a kid to ride the bike, a bike, because I am the training wheels. And I left for vacation for a week, and I come back, and Tim tells me, "Oh, I've gone exploring on my own, and I've done this on my own." And so it's just nice to see my boy growing up and getting better. So that's been an interesting experience, having been there myself at one point. I'm also playing a game called The Song of Seven, and it's just this really small adventure game. It's episode 1. I think it's like $8 on Steam, and it's this like beautifully rendered 3D traditional kind of point and click adventure game. You start off in this like this village that has a giant fence up, and you're this lowly teen. Yeah, there it is. And with a tail, and you step outside the fence one day and kind of explore the world and meet characters and discover, prophecy and all these kind of these fantasy tropes. But it's kind of refreshing to play an adventure game that looks as nice as this one, and seems to be written pretty well. So I'm really enjoying that. Again, it's like $8 on Steam for episode 1, so it's kind of an easy recommendation for me if you like those types of games.
Yeah, it's real pretty too.
Yeah, I like it a lot.
So it's like is it like a point and click adventure?
Mm-hmm. It's point and click in that you have a cursor and you can click on things in the environment. Your character will walk over and say things, but you can use WASD to wander around the environment and sprint, like earlier Telltale games. So it's a nice mix of 3D exploration and the granular exploration of individual objects and combining them and using them on certain things in the environment. So yeah,
cool.
It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, honestly, I think personally I've mainly been playing Stellaris and Doom. I've been jumping between those two pretty much all week, actually, since Doom came out. It's weird to jump between two games that are so different like that. Because they're so different. They're 100% different games. Stellaris, there are moments where I literally just stopped and I've just sat back and just sat in my chair and watched my little ships flying around. Yeah. And Doom is maybe the literal opposite of that game. I mean, I guess they're both in space, technically. Doom's on Mars.
There is a Mars in Stellaris. You can rename planets, but you can also spawn in the Sol system.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Maybe we should just role play it like Doom is happening within Stellaris, like in the same timeline.
Seems plausible.
You could build transport ships and send troops to Mars if you wanted, and like have like you can build like alien forces and robots and stuff if you want to troops and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay. So we could role play it. But yeah, it's super strange because I found myself, doing a level of Doom and then putting it down, having dinner or something, and then coming back and then just zoning out with Stellaris for a little bit. And then when I was done with that, going back and doing one more level of Doom to just like cap it out. Because you can blow through a level, you get to a checkpoint, 10, 15 minutes or something like that, and then just say, okay, I'm good for now. Go back to your space civilization.
Interesting.
It's a weird combo, but I'm enjoying it.
Good combo.
But let's talk a little bit more in depth about Stellaris, because I think all three of us have been playing it a good amount this week. It's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying it. I'll post the link to our review in chat, but you can always go to pcgamer.com/Stellaris-review to find it there. Phil Savage, the guy who reviewed it for us, was a little less enamored with the mid-game, late-game, and I haven't quite gotten there yet, but I'm really enjoying what I've played so far.
Yeah, I agree completely with Phil's review. I think it's spot on. And I guess I would reinforce our view that like a 70 is not a bad score. It's a terrifically pleasant game that has some shortcomings, and we can't review games based on what they're going to change in the future. That's impossible and would be a bad idea. But I think we expect, based on Paradox's previous work, that they're going to kind of fill in the gaps, and they've said that much even this week. So we're looking forward to them kind of filling in what's missing there. But yeah, so if you're totally unfamiliar with this genre, it's a kind of a mashup between 4X and Grand Strategy. So Grand Strategy being like Crusader Kings or something along those lines, and 4X being, Civ and Galactic Civilizations. The Explore, Expand, Exploit, Exterminate genre, I guess.
Is that all of them?
I think it is.
I think so.
At least I can guess myself. But yeah, if you played Sins of a Solar Empire, you're kind of in that neighborhood. I think Sins is much more tactical and combat focused, and this is a little bit more economic focused. But yeah, the thing that strikes me about Stellaris, amazing soundtrack. You can you get little tastes of like the Tron Legacy soundtrack in there, and Mass Effect, and just other like classic sci-fi movie sounds, which really kind of put you in the scene. But the early game is a treasure, and it's because it really captures the like noble and exciting uncertainty of like humanity or whatever civilization you choose to play, like going outward and like taking its first baby steps outside its solar system, and the great uncertainty of like what lies beyond, and like, oh, what is this alien species, and like making first contact and encountering other civilizations that haven't yet reached the space age, and like how do you handle that? Do you take like a Star Trek approach with the Prime Directive and say like we're only going to passively study them, or do you like directly engage with them, or do you infiltrate their government and with like secret agents basically, and then like prepare it for takeover in a few decades or something? That's just like this, the top layer of it. But I think the big takeaway about Stellaris for me is it really captures the beauty and romance of space exploration as an ideal, as like a human goal, even if you're playing as mushroom people or lobster people or whatever, which you can definitely do. It just, in that early game, the experience of throwing your science ships out there, finding stuff, discovering anomalies. I think the writing in the game is excellent. The kind of, these anomalies are like little sub-quests, I guess, that your science ships discover. Like on some planets, there's a percent chance that they'll find unusual things. You research them, and there's a percent chance that they will get a positive benefit or fail from those anomalies. And yeah, they have like lots of little nods to the classic sci-fi and especially Star Trek that you will see in these anomalies. And I think they're one of the most delightful parts of the game, because you're just like, oh wow, like we found an ancient dead civilization that would like, and they left behind this really interesting remnant. And even though you're just getting like science points from doing that for the most part, the text is really engaging. I think it's just terrifically written, so that adds a lot.
And for me, it leaves enough room to also role play on top of that.
Yeah.
Like the text is very well written and engaging, but also just vague enough that you can insert your own narrative into it, which I think is really, really important for a game which is essentially about building a story of a civilization, right? That's the appeal to me, is you are in control of this, like you said, this brand new civ that you get to grow and you get to decide its fate, and telling that story is really important to me as a player, at least.
I think one of the other interesting parts about it, compared to something like Civ 5, and hey, Civ 6 got announced, by the way. That's
Yeah,
pretty
wow.
cool. Did we talk about that last week?
We did.
Great.
A lot.
Cool. So I won't go into it too much, but the government style and sort of the ethic of your civilization, your species, and that empire is something you customize at the outset. I think there are ways to change it over time, but that gives you like a very different kind of playing experience throughout your campaign, where if you're playing as like an isolationist, like spiritual fanatic, you're going to have different goals than if you're playing as like a xenophile, where you love other alien species, and like maybe you're warlike, or maybe you're interested in, I don't know, like forming a federation. I think one of the things that is missing that I'm still discovering in this game is that the listed victory conditions in the game are, gosh, what is it?
It's like control 40% of the systems or destroy all other
Yeah,
civs or something.
it's like dominate or conquer, which is like kill everything or own everything. Which is sort of like, well, hold on. So it seems like the game definitely, and this is probably one of my criticisms, like it encourages you to like eventually do military stuff, which I don't think anybody who plays Civ, like the science victory is like really fun to me. The cultural victory is really fun.
Yeah.
So looking forward to seeing how they iterate on that. But
Also, just real quick to call out, The Last Casuals just subscribed in Twitch chat, so thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's I definitely miss a little bit of that too, because one of my most memorable Civ 5 victories was playing as Venice, which is the Civ that was added, I think, in Brave New World,
Yeah,
where
it
you
was.
can only have one city.
You're a city-state, right?
Well, the idea is that you're a city-state who
Yeah.
was like grew up
Yeah,
basically,
okay.
and a lot of the abilities of Venice are all about city-states and helping city-states, and you can have these puppet cities, but you can't directly control any others. And that was one of my favorite victories because I just had all of the money in the entire game, and I just bought everything and then bought myself a diplomatic victory. And I never went to war with anyone. I barely fought barbarians even. I basically didn't have an army at all, and I slowly built up influence and won the game. And maybe that's possible in Stellaris, because I haven't gotten that far, but I don't see how it's possible.
I'm not sure if it's tied to victory conditions. I'm still in the mid game with two different campaigns. You can create vassals and you can create protectorates, where you're like, okay, little civilization who's like 1/10 of my size, I will offer to protect you if you like give me these certain benefits over time or something like that. But yeah, once you've kind of spread all of your science ships all around, you've seen all the planets that are accessible within the galactic map, and you've explored all the anomalies, and you've gotten like some key research stuff, you're sort of like, okay, now what? You own all the stuff you can. You're colonizing a lot of planets, and that's fun. Like I think the planetary customization, there's sort of like a tile-based menu where you're deciding whether, okay, I want a power plant here, or do I want a research center, or do I want to grow food or minerals? And then you're doing that across many planets and sectors, and trying to sort of even the scales of like, okay, I need more power so that I can, support more mineral plants and research stations, but I want this sector to focus on, building defenses and war troops and stuff like that, and spaceships. So that's kind of a fun game over time, but the political game and the diplomacy, is kind of the biggest shortcoming for me so far. I feel like I made a mistake playing on normal difficulty because they kind of just leave you alone for the most part. There are some interesting types of factions. There are these fallen empires in the game, which are sort of, think of it as like they're the grandfathers of space, who have been, they've been in this neighborhood for a long time. You're the new kid on the block. You just learned how to travel around in space. Oh, like that's really cute. They don't grow. They do not seek more territory. They're static or stagnant basically, but they're extremely powerful. So and some of them, for example, will be like, say if they're like spiritualists again, they'll be like, do not colonize these holy worlds that we've identified like around our territory, or else we'll get super mad at you. But yeah, basically, like that adds a little bit more texture and asymmetry, where like not every faction is the same, just trying to grow, and it makes it less of a space race, so to speak, which I totally appreciate. I think these kind of games, you look at Crusader Kings 2, they're at their best when they're asymmetrical, messy, and weird. Where like, 1-year-old babies are creating like assassination attempts and shit. Like that is amazing in Crusader Kings. That's more of what I want to see in this game over time. Just like weird. There's no spy game.
Yeah.
I mean, apart from like, you can create alliances with people and like get their star charts and do trade deals and stuff like that. But there's no like true like spying on your enemies in there.
Dowie in the chat mentioned that they removed other victory conditions because they felt that they didn't quite fit, but that they said they hope to add them in again too.
Good.
So there's a chance that Paradox knows a lot of these criticisms and is working to expand those. And there's actually, they've publicly said they're going to. The game director said that they've kind of outlined a lot of big changes that are coming, and in this post that he wrote about it, very clearly actually said we knew there was going to be a fair amount of criticism in terms of stuff to do in the mid game, basically, and we knew that it was less developed, and we're planning to fix that, and here's how. Which is it instills so much confidence in me as a gamer to hear a developer be like, yeah, we accept, instead of just being like, oh, these reviewers disagreed. They just accept it. They say, yeah, we agree, and here's how we're fixing it. I think that's great. That's so cool. And I agree. I want to see something like spying come in as part of those updates.
Yeah, I think it's worth, I want to underline at least, I put 37 hours in this game. I'm still having a great time with it. I will continue to play it. I want to play multiplayer with some people because I think that'll make it a lot more interesting. I'll call out one kind of weird story that I had real quick, and it's kind of a result of not a bug, but just like the generation. So, there's a like human race you can play as, of course, that are very kind of Federation-like. I guess you're almost playing as the UN, and you spawn in the Sol system, and you have Earth and Jupiter and everything else. There's no Pluto, which is interesting. Anyway, so you're exploring outward, and there's like oh god, what's the nearest star to Earth? I forget the name of it right now. So like everything is accurate. Like all like Saturn, everything is nearby, and like hey, Jupiter is a gas giant that gives you energy credits and stuff like that. You're exploring outward.
Alpha Centauri.
Thank you. Yeah, of course. It's another 4X game.
I had to Google it just to make sure I wasn't going to embarrass myself on the podcast.
So that's in the neighborhood, but like as you go further out, it's not like modeling the Milky Way or anything. But I explored like 3 solar systems away from mine, and I see this system called Sol, and I'm like, hold on, okay, what's going on? So I zoom in, I get at the solar system level, and I'm like, okay, that's a little weird. There is a Earth equivalent. There's a like same type of sun. There's every identical planet as the Sol system. I'm like, okay, that's really weird. So I go in even further, and I look at the planet level and the surface of Earth, and it's populated by humans who are in like they're in like the machine age. Like all these like primitive civilizations age over time, and eventually they get smart enough to kick themselves into space, and you can interact with them, and they kind of get on your level. So I'm like, holy shit, this is like an X-Files episode or like a classic sci-fi book where you stumble on like an equivalent like copy of your solar system that's like a little bit younger than you. And I don't know, I like fantasize about this idea of I infiltrate their government or something. And then like years later in real life, I like see the repercussions of my in-game actions or something. that somehow the planet I discovered was actually ours.
Oh, that'd be beautiful.
Like an Ender's Game type thing. I don't know.
How do you know that's not what happened?
It could be.
Jury's still out, man.
It could be. So that was weird. And it's just like a result of, Stellaris generates a bunch of planets, and Sol is one of the ones in the database, presumably. But it created an interesting story. And that is the kind of thing I want out of these games, just like weird things that emerge out of the systems,
Mm-hmm. I'm not always concerned with winning or doing particularly well. It's just
I hope I lose spectacularly.
Oh, exactly. Yeah. It's all about creating your own drama and story and role playing to a fault. And that's been a problem for me. Is I'm stuck on role playing very religious birds, and that means rejecting anytime I discover an anomaly and my civilization. My scientists react to it and say, we want to research this and find out more. This is good. And then my leaders, they say, no, this is blasphemy. It resembles this thing in our ancient text. And I'm a very curious person. but I have to click no and say, no, this is blasphemy. It's a terrible omen. And so I'm kind of this, I kind of just turn into these small, conceited, insular civilizations that just reject everyone and everything. And it's really fun to play that. And eventually, my first game ended with my civilization basically consuming itself and just being overrun by powerful, smarter civilizations. But it was fun to go down in flames like that. It was really cool.
I mean, I've played a lot of Civ 5,
Yeah.
and I could probably count how many games I've finished of Civ 5 on like two hands, you know? I like doing that part of games like this where you just start and you have an idea that you have fun with and you explore and you role play it for a bit and then you're like, okay, and try something else. I think there's merit in that, you know? There's a lot of people who probably read our review of Stellaris who, you know, hear there's mid-game and end-game problems. We'll never get to that mid-game or end-game. Like, I might not ever get to that mid-game because I just love, like you said, the early game exploration is so much fun that when I get to the mid-game, I'm just like, I'm going to start a new Civ.
Exactly. And like the research choices, there are 3 kinds of research feel
Yeah.
very important at the early game.
Yeah, they do.
As opposed to the mid-game where you're sort of like, okay, well, I guess I'll take level 4 torpedoes. I was pretty happy with level 3, but I guess 4 is an improvement, you know? And you're just kind of like piling up all the stuff that you have. So yeah, just really, I think it's a super promising game. We're going to continue to cover it, obviously, and play it, but the early game is fantastic. If you are at all interested in like space exploration, as you know, if you follow NASA history and stuff like that, like this is a game for you, absolutely.
Have either of you played any of the multiplayer yet? Mm-mm. Because, God, I want to, but that seems so intimidating. It seems crazy intimidating. The fact that games are, you know, days long. Like, I'm not even sure how long a normal match is supposed to last, but it's got to be multiple dozens of hours, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you can play it on a faster speed and a smaller map, and that'll encourage things to happen quicker. But I can't imagine you can finish a multiplayer setting without, like, spending an entire weekend doing so. I don't know. But at the same time, I want to do that. You know, I want to I want to try to conquer space better than you guys. Like,
I just want to
head-to-head.
I want to have a pact where we all agree to play a game where we're peaceful and nice. And
incredibly conniving.
This
and
is the
political.
equivalent of like StarCraft, where you'd be like, all right, guys, like build for 30 minutes and don't touch each other. And then like maybe we'll just like throw our armies at one another and see who wins.
I'm just a baby gamer. I'm bad at
You
military.
want to build a sandcastle, not an army, you know? Yeah.
I'm down to try that, though. Except I will be secretly building an army the entire
I know you, Tom.
time.
Son of a bitch.
I will. Except the thing is, I'm going to send it to like some faraway system and just leave it away from my stuff. So I'll share, you know, star maps and stuff with you. We can be very like buddy, but I'll just always keep those in the shadows and then just swoop in at the end.
No.
That'll be great.
All right. Jerk.
Let's jump along, though. Let's talk about some weird game movies. Because this is some weird movie talk.
Yeah.
I want to start with the Assassin's Creed movie trailer, but we're also going to touch on Overwatch, which has been getting these phenomenal short films lately. The most recent one was called Dragons. Very, very cool. But first, we have a different kind of video game movie, which is the Assassin's Creed movie got its first trailer, which was, you know, this isn't exactly video games, but I think it's the first time, it's the biggest movie to get, or biggest like game movie to come out in a while. So I think it's an interesting thing to look at.
With Warcraft on the horizon in June,
Yes,
of course.
exactly.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I guess it's a big time for video game movies, but I pulled up the trailer right now and like it just looks so like generic-y action movie, I guess. But like at the same time, I love the idea of the problem with Assassin's Creed to me has never been the concept. I've always loved the concept of the animus machines within the games and how that relates. And I feel like it might actually be an okay concept for a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, Fassbender's a great actor.
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
honestly, I think it could work. The trailer didn't exactly encourage me, but without the animus stuff in there, I think it becomes a much less interesting, just kind of weird historical movie about it killing folks. There's a lot of discussion around the use of music in the trailer, like Kanye. I think Games Radar, one of our sister publications here, replaced that track with some of the original Assassin's Creed music, and it didn't really work either, personally. But hopefully they don't use like a lot of contemporary music to make it more mainstream. But I don't know, it could be fun. I mean, but again, what are the success stories and what's sort of the track record of game movies? We're all pretty aware of that. Hitman, Pixels, Hardcore Henry, which we talked about in the Max Payne. I think we kind of expected to fit in that pile,
Yeah. I'm super confused I don't know how to feel about this movie, because if I recall correctly, it's directed by the same director who recently directed an adaptation of Macbeth, starring Michael Fassbender and I forget the actress's name, but which was like a pretty good rendition of that movie. And this, I don't know, that signposts a couple things to me, that this is like sort of an obligatory how he took care of making a Macbeth movie.
Like how Zack Snyder had to make that movie about owls in order to do Batman.
Yeah,
right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Provably had to do that.
Yeah, but it also kind of gives me hope, because maybe I don't think that Macbeth film was, the best rendition of Macbeth I've ever seen before, but it's, a more artful film than most, and it gives me hope for Assassin's Creed being more than what this trailer comes across as, which is just a big ole weirdo like bro down in wherever it's set. Just the tone of Kanye West. I can't see an Assassin's Creed outfit anymore and not think of like those hoodies with that try to emulate the same thing. They have like the design on the front and like the beak and everything. It just speaks of like ill-informed cosplay to me. I don't know. I think it might be a little too faithful in some respects.
He's got face tattoos. Ezio didn't have face tattoos.
I don't know. I can't really make any huge conclusions, but it looks a little too hokey.
So here's a question I have. First of all, the Prime Willis subscribed in chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But here's the question I have of this is the Warcraft movie is coming out.
Yeah.
Trailers don't look bad for that. Looks kind of interesting. I'm not a huge fan of the crazy amount of CG in it, but not so bad. This movie, completely devoid of the video game, looks like an okay action movie in my eyes. Nintendo even announced recently or said recently that there's movies coming, or at least it was rumored, that potentially they're going to start making some Nintendo movies as well. Yeah. But as you said, Evan, the track record for video game movies is pretty abysmal. It's like almost across the board just not good. So why do people keep trying to make video game movies?
I don't know. I mean, it's got to be a combination of Ubisoft is the or almost the biggest game studio in the world, and they have a very popular brand that they want to extend and grow. Legendary has a reputation, and they're the studio making the movie, I believe. They make these kinds of like nerdy sci-fi fantasy movies. It's kind of up their alley. So I don't know. I mean, we don't need to get into it. The whole Hollywood industry, kind of like ours, is pretty light on originality lately, and heavy on references and reviving old stuff. That's nothing new. They want to make safe plays, and this might be one. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the flip side of it, in my eyes, is what Blizzard is doing, which is why I wanted to talk about these two things together, because Overwatch isn't going to have a single player. It's not going to have any story within the game. It's going to be exclusively a multiplayer competitive shooter. But they've been releasing in anticipation of the game's launch next week, which is, my God, it comes out next week. It totally snuck up on me. In anticipation of that, they've been releasing these kind of slightly interactive animated comic books online, and then they've also been doing these downright gorgeous animated short movies instead of something big, they're doing these smaller things that just give you kind of a glimpse into the world. And these are phenomenal, in my opinion. I think they're beautifully animated. As somebody brought up, the writing is not the most original or anything like that. Like, the writing isn't
Not at all.
drop dead amazing, but they're just gorgeous. You could say Pixar made them, and I'd probably believe you. You know, like they're really, really top notch. So I just feel like Blizzard kind of has the right idea. Like, they understand what they're good at and what, like, their game, the format that their games look good in, and they're presenting them that way. And I say that having just, you know, kind of knocked on the Warcraft movie coming out at the same time, but, like, it just seems so strange that, like, I want an Overwatch feature-length movie, but maybe they just know that wouldn't work and they're doing these instead. Or maybe they're getting ready to do that, you know? Like, I don't know. It's just, I'm really digging these Overwatch movies, though. And I'll watch this 1,000 times, and I'm more excited to watch this than the Assassin's Creed movie, even though I'm probably going to go see that as well.
Well, you don't have to pay for this. That's part of it, sure.
That is a big thing.
I mean, Blizzard has a very unique resource, right? I mean, very few folks out there, I'm struggling to think of another actually, have an internal studio that produces cinematics and has done that for more than a decade.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, this is their formula. This is a fundamental part of what Blizzard does. I'm sure part of day one, this is their strategy. You know, I guess once they knew they were making an Overwatch game and not Titan. But yeah, the one thing that this really does for me, even having spent time in the beta, it adds character to the level that's presented here. I forget the name of it actually, but
Hanamura.
Thank you.
I'm a big Overwatch nerd.
I think it's, you know, a lot of developers, miss out on the opportunity to add character, like treat their levels as characters, I should say. You're spending more time with levels than even some characters, I think, depending on which games you're playing. And obviously it's adding backstory and context and personality and history. You know, it's going to mean a little bit something when Hanzo encounters Genji in your game and you're playing as one of those characters that has this kind of extra layer of meaning now that it's known that they're brothers and or whatnot. But yeah, really it's like when I'm going to be inhabiting this space, which in any other shooter I think would just be, oh, this is like the Asian themed map with pagodas and stuff. And that's cool. It looks pretty, but like there's extra meaning when you're fighting in that area. On that capture point, it means a little bit more something. I think that's what adds most to me, and actually means a lot. You look at, again, Team Fortress 2, which, you know, people have obviously compared Overwatch to since the outset, even though there are different games in a lot of significant ways. Without those shorts for TF2, without those Meet the Shorts that added tons of personality and sort of helped you know what it meant to be the spy and sort of adding these little memes that players iterated on and spun off in the game and outside of the game over time. I mean, it's unbelievably important to the lifespan of that game and people's connection with it. I mean, I hate to criticize Battleborn, which folks have, again, kind of wrongly, I think, directly put Overwatch up against as if it's like apples to apples. They're not the same game. They're really going for different styles of game at all. Battleborn has a story mode for one thing, but you know, they released also some digital comics and stuff like that. But I think for me, like, you can't just expect to release a game or announce a game that has like a bunch of wacky characters of like all different aesthetics and backgrounds, and like visually they're very rich, but if you're not really like educating us about their personality, not getting us excited about their voice, their history, their spirit, like, you're not seeing them move as we're watching now on screen, like in these exciting ways that kind of activate your passion for how you play and stuff like that. Like you can't expect to build a visually interesting character in it, like a character-rich FPS, and just expect me to like glom onto them and attach myself to them. You know, you need to sort of fill in that background.
I agree completely. If I'm going to do the thing where I'm just grumpy on the podcast all the time, though, and say I do wish these Blizzard shorts had a bit more substance, or like didn't feel so cliched. When this last one came out, there was a video. I forgot the YouTuber who made it, but the video detailed or predicted in broad strokes what the next Blizzard a Overwatch cinematic would be, and it was just a series of cliches and like these Asian tropes and so on that were exactly what Blizzard made.
Yeah,
and
it was pretty hauntingly close.
And that, I don't know, to me, what I was most excited about Overwatch is the characters, and I mean, obviously the shooting, but like how, like you said, Evan, that stuff can inform your play. I'm disappointed to see that these characters are pretty much cardboard cutouts of many others I've seen before. Sure, yeah, it's nice to get this background and everything, but they're so creative, and Blizzard has so many resources that I wanted to see a little more personality or distinct personality.
I think it's hard when you have to make 21 like completely distinct characters. It's easy to lean on tropes then. Not saying they aren't doing that, just that it's sort of understandable.
For sure. I just felt like I got more personality from the first two shorts, and these characters, especially because they're banking on these. I can't speak to Asian cultures and how closely the majority of those people are tied to their history and culture, but these especially felt kind of lame because it's like, oh, they're ninjas doing ninja stuff and talking about honor and family and what? But who are these people? Like, who are they really? I don't need to like know what their favorite color is and like their deepest, darkest, fears. But
Yeah, but Winston, for example, right? He's an ape that was raised on the moon. In a lab, and he really likes to read. He's sort of like has a lighthearted side. Part of it is like this was a very melodramatic short, right? Where like, like the struggle between, yin and yang, dragons intertwining in this woodblock art, and like, these guys, these brothers love each other a lot, but they also hate each other. It's been done, but and like Tom's saying, I think to some extent, when you're building a massive cast of characters, I think MOBAs, you look at why they build under certain archetypes and why certain characters repeat themselves across these different kinds of games. It's because you want to cash in on that familiarity instead of explaining like, okay, for every character, explain it for every character. Okay, like this guy has like completely new set of mechanics and like identity and like that you've never experienced before, and now we need to sort of like sit you down and educate you.
Yeah.
This is the archer guy. That works. You can immediately hop into that role if you played similar archer guys or girls in other games. He played Ashe, for example, in League. I can't even remember Ashe in League of Legends.
Yes.
Great. Thanks.
Sparrow in Paragon.
Thank you. It's nice to be able to sort of transfer that skill set and understanding, because like I played almost all these games. It's easy to do that.
Absolutely.
Honk Fu in the chat says, realize that you're complaining about something that most players don't care about. League just started doing lore for some of their champs, which is a good point as well. League has had these couple paragraph descriptions of their characters, but they only really recently just started doing anything more in depth than that.
Yeah.
Even something like Heroes of the Storm just relies on pre-existing lore, and the lore of the Nexus, the world in Heroes of the Storm is just like, whatever. Like they're all together fighting. I think that's a good point that these story things are something that I love because I'm a story nut, but the vast majority of the people playing the game are probably aren't going to watch it and don't really care. They're just going to play the game, and I think that clarity is useful for that. But I do wish, because of the story nut in me, that they were a little bit more, I don't know, fleshed out, like you said, or not fleshed out, but in depth, I guess.
I don't know. You can't underestimate how expensive these things are to produce.
Yeah.
I mean, I heard recently.
No kidding.
Folks in the game industry will recognize Blur as the company who makes a lot of the big cinematic trailers, and I think Blur, for example, made the Dawn of War 3 trailer, which I think was like close to 4 minutes long. It was pretty big as a like first reveal, and someone this is just secondhand, but somebody told me that Blur used to, and may even ask for more, quote, $1 million a minute for the creation of that kind of trailer or video asset. So you can imagine like Blizzard's CG department is as good as it gets. You're not paying interns to crank this stuff out in MS Paint.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like I have a brother who works he works at Sony Animation, like the people who do Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs and stuff like that. And yeah, it's incredible how much time even just one shot takes, you know? Like these videos that Blizzard's been putting out are like 7 minutes long, and that's not short, you know? Like that's a short movie for us to watch, but that is not a short amount of stuff to produce.
Yeah, I mean, again, compared to a Pixar movie that's 90 minutes long, so
yeah,
not insignificant.
No, definitely. One of the things that I did want to bring up real fast also, just to cap off the discussion, the livid argument that we're having right now is about the Assassin's Creed movie. I brought this up at the beginning and I didn't actually mention it, is that they have pre-order bonuses for your Assassin's Creed film tickets, which we cannot not talk about. Like, we have, what in God's name?
Well, it makes sense, right?
Does it though?
Okay, well, it makes sense, like, from a marketing perspective. I can see like Assassin's Creed diehards, which I know a lot of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
Like, anyway,
it's a good game.
I can
it's a
see
good game
them.
to be a diehard about.
I guarantee like that word in particular, when you're talking about the movie, is going to appeal to a lot of those diehards.
I would be surprised if the Warcraft movie doesn't have some somewhat similar promotion, and would we object to that? I mean, is it really, is what we're really saying is like, oh, Ubisoft, like, you know, they release all these annual franchises and they have DLC and stuff like that, but Blizzard, you know, they just love their community. Like, are we just like reframing it because of the company? Because I mean, most people buy their movie tickets in advance, right?
Yep.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying pre-orders as a universal thing are okay, but what's wrong with, like, I'm really passionate about Assassin's Creed and I want a T-shirt, you know?
Velociror in the chat says truly faithful to the source material. So
sure.
But no, I agree.
It's
I
funny and unexpected, but like,
yeah.
I usually
is it
pre-order.
offensive?
No.
I usually pre-order my movie tickets or buy ahead of time. You know, the word pre-order just isn't
It's
used
just
in
funny.
movies, right?
It's just funny.
It's funny, and it's especially funny when you read like the tiers of it, which is that there's the base package is a $15 thing that I think just gets you a ticket to the movie and a copy of the script, and then a link to some behind the scenes stuff.
oh right, there's a tier that gives you like a statue. Right?
Potentially, but there is a tier that is $1,200.
Yeah.
That gets you a replica of the crossbow used in, quote, a pivotal scene, end quote. I can't imagine, I mean, at that point, you're just selling a crossbow replica that comes with a movie ticket. Like, you're not selling a movie ticket that comes with a crossbow replica.
Do you think they hand it to you at the door and you just, like, everyone in the theaters? Like,
I would love to like time travel somebody from the Middle Ages into this scenario and sit them down and walk them through like an actual crossbowman. And so like, okay, you're gonna want to sit down for this one. So we made this sort of like, you know, modern play, if plays even existed in your time, of like the combat that you do. Okay, great, got it. And you know, people kind of like watch this and you know they engage with it, but also as they pay, you know, our like modern gold coins in order to attend this reenactment, they get a free crossbow. That doesn't quite work because we don't have that kind of war anymore. But like to sort of commemorate the war that you do in your time. Okay, that's really confusing. You're a strange people.
we are a strange people.
But hey, I mean, people like replica weapons. I know plenty of folks who have sweet ass samurai swords.
Yeah, I don't mean to ridicule it. It's just a funny bonus to see with a movie ticket.
Yeah, it is.
Get a giant ass crossbow, bro.
Yeah, no, it's just funny. I mean, we can move on. It is definitely one of those. I think you're right though. The way it's presented is so important to how people receive it too. Because if you remember the Deus Ex thing, the augment your pre-order that had happened, and everyone was like, "This is ridiculous," and like totally ragged on it. And there have been games that have done that literally exact same thing since then, and they just haven't presented it as an augment your pre-order sort of thing, and everyone's okay with it, or at least not as outraged about it. So yeah, I think the presentation of that stuff is important. But let's talk about Doom and Demons and Doom, because that's an important thing to talk about. I'm actually going to pull down the Cacodemon for this part.
Oh, hey.
We got
Great.
a Cacodemon going.
He has something to say. Yeah.
He does. I'm a fan of Doom, man. James,
Yeah.
you've been in Doom World since
Yes.
since the game came out on Friday.
Yeah, I've been reviewing that sucker, and that review should go up today if it's not up already. I don't know. But Doom. Do you guys... Doom. Where do I begin?
Begin with the shooting.
This is a departure/return for Doom. Doom 3, right, was survival horror oriented. Mm-hmm. Then there was development limbo we heard about forever and ever. I think one of the developers came out and said that they were years and years into a project where Doom sort of looked like, Doom 4 looked like a stop and pop, almost Call of Duty-esque shooter. And they stopped and looked at what they had and said, what are we doing? Is this Doom? Are we just following trends and giving it a label? So they scrapped it, started over, looked at what Doom, when it began, essentially was and what made it great. And that was just the gunplay, right? It was just the shooting, coupled with a kind of a silly, creepy, presentation. Where in 1993, if you saw a pixelated demon, it was probably creepier than it is today. Today, it's just kind of rad and silly, and so they've moved on from survival horror into this new game where you kick within the first minute. You wake up, sit up out of a demonic sarcophagus. You're surrounded by these possessed Mars citizens. You're on Mars, if I haven't said that already. And you smash one's head against the side of the sarcophagus, get up and kill about 4 more of them, hop into your Doom suit, and you're off. Like, it wastes no time. Absolutely no time. The game is essentially structured like the original games, Doom 1 and 2. Levels are, these big sprawls with multiple levels and all these terraces you can climb onto, and hidden pathways, hidden rooms. There are certain rooms you'll open up, certain arenas that will, the doors will shut down and demons will just spawn by the dozen, and you run around quickly and shoot them. It's simple and exciting, and because it's so pared back compared to what we play a lot of today, it feels refreshing and invigorating, and I'm really into it.
Yeah, what it does, I think, at a core level in terms of that, the combat loop is it recaptures the feeling of spontaneity.
Yeah.
In a different way. You think original Doom, you're doing a lot of backpedaling. Mm-hmm. You're doing a lot of side strafing, and you're just kind of throwing stuff. You're overwhelmed. You're doing like target prioritization. Who do I go after first? But ultimately, it's a lot of backpedaling and just like you're on a skateboard, super fast movement. You're going through your guns. You're rifling through them. In this case, there's like a really interesting focus around this melee mechanic.
Yeah.
Which I'll let you dig into. But it's still in a different but similar way to the original Doom, inspires that kind of like thinking on your feet, move constantly, shoot everything, don't stand still ever.
Mm-hmm. If you stand still, you will die very quickly in this game. Yeah, the melee system, they're called glory kills. If you do enough damage to an enemy, they'll kind of get this sheen over them and go into a stagger state and kind of sit there for a short while. And if you're within range, you can tap the melee button, and you'll zoom right up to them, and depending on where it's contextual, so depending on where you're looking at them, or from above, or if you're looking at their legs or their side, you'll do a different animation that just decimates them instantly. And by doing these glory kills, you guarantee they're going to drop health. So it's this kind of nice trade-off where typically, like you said, you're backpedaling and you're strafing and so on, trying to kind of keep away from this giant clusterfuck of demons always coming at you. But if you're getting low on health, you have to get in the shit and, risk, as soon as you're done with this animation, there's probably a couple more demons to the left and right of you, above you. How are you going to get out of that? So it's a nice risk reward that forces you to, instead of just run between every corner of the room, to get in it and stay in it. And I really like that.
And I think fundamentally why this is resonating with us and basically every other critic, the campaign specifically, we'll talk about the multiplayer too, is it is a complete antidote to the enemy behavior we see in sort of more contemporary or like military style games where you have human enemies with human guns and they stand behind cover, or they roughly stand still. They might advance on you a little bit, but for the most part, you're also behind cover. Even in Wolfenstein, which we liked a lot, had a lot of creativity, like love the setting, like irreverent, has a sense of humor like Doom does. Obviously, it's the same publisher, but like ultimately, you're kind of shooting at static targets. In this case, Doom, like the setting, they really take advantage of like, okay, we can make you super fast. We don't have to explain it. It's your suit, whatever. There's pickups in the ground. Who cares? Whatever. That's kind of weird. And the enemies themselves are very mobile.
Oh yeah. So, like I was saying, every level is or every arena is this giant sprawl where there's jump pads, there's multiple levels you can climb up to, all these different platforms, and anywhere you can go, any demon can follow. So if you have like 4 Hell Knights chasing you, simply like hitting a jump pad and hopping up to a high platform and shooting, they're coming after you, and pretty quickly. Even the pinkies, these like little the rhinoceros type enemies they got a hell of a vertical. The Mancubus, is that how you say it? The Mancubus, they look big, they look heavy, they got powerful thighs and calves. Like,
low gravity in Mars.
That might be part of it. Anywhere you can go, they will follow. So there's no such thing as a safe haven. And like you said, like any object in the environment is not there to be hidden around. At no point was I ever stopping and peeking around objects. Maybe like there was a pillar in the way that I would quickly strafe behind to avoid a projectile. But I never stayed in the same place for 1 second. Neither did they.
So obviously you finished it. I'm still working through the campaign. I'm pretty early in. I think one of the things that pleases me most is just sort of being thrown in these new environments that are kind of jungle gym like, have a lot of little platforms and terraces and kind of like mesa like plateaus to jump onto, and you're just like you have to quickly analyze it in the moment as you're being chased, as fireballs are being thrown at you, as like all different threats who have different movement behaviors are spawning, and sort of jump and dodge but also like get the job done. So it's kind of an interesting game where your offense is part of your defense is part of your offense, right? Like agility, you have to evade, but also put yourself in a position to set up certain shots and those melee kills, right?
Yeah.
But something I want to dig into, because this is like a legitimate point of criticism for some folks, especially like classic Doom fans, is, oh man, all these like QTE kills, they're not QTEs, but like they're the glory kills. It's a context sensitive thing. It's over very quickly. The animation's like super fast and jarring, but it's like, oh, like Doom is a shooter. It's about shooting. Why am I punching everything to get health? Why am I like hitting F to kill guys? Like, do you feel like, over the course of the game that there's just way too much melee kill like as a finisher, and it's less about shooting ultimately?
No, not really. There is a lot of glory killing, but at no point do you have to do it. It comes with that huge risk of getting closer to them, and they are so quick, cool, and varied. Like there's, I don't know how many per enemy, but like 5 or 6 maybe.
Yeah, I had one where I was like falling down. I just happened to be falling down off this like little bit of elevation, and I had to like basically curb stomp the guy as opposed to like grappling with him with my hands. I like just fell on him.
Yeah.
And it felt like a super clean transition. I was really impressed.
It's never like when we traditionally think of QuickTime animations, we think of like this prolonged sequence where our player character slots into place and follows through the slow thing. It always feels like a continuation of the move, like the very quick movement you're already.
It's doing. Like follow through.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like a quick time event in any traditional way at all. You're looking at us over here, Tom.
Real talk.
What?
Hate the melee kills.
Why?
I absolutely hate them.
Why?
Because I think that they totally change the pace of what is otherwise like an on skateboard shooter, and it influences the design of the game in a way that I think is really negative. And for the record, I'm really, really enjoying the single player campaign. So it's not to the point that it's making me dislike the game, but I don't think that the melee kills, it's not that they're made bad or anything, or that the mechanics don't work. It's that I wish they did not exist within the design of the game. And it's partly as superficial as the fact that I don't like that these demons suddenly start glowing blue. Like, that's a really small thing that is totally superficial, but it's super weird to me that I shoot a demon in the face with a shotgun and he gets this techno blue glow on him, right? The other reason is because and this might be just a perception, because I complained about this originally with you, James, and you told me, you know, I was doing something wrong, which I kind of was, is that I don't like shooting a demon with a shotgun and having them just not die and instead turn blue. And your solution was the shotgun needs to be closer range, which is true. I needed to be closer to get those one-shot kills on them, but it's still weird that I can be at medium range, shoot an imp, and instead of just exploding in blood like I want him to, he kind of staggers and just stands there. It makes my shotgun feel weaker than my hands, which I just don't like that perception of. And there was another problem, or another complaint that actually somebody in the chat brought up too, which is that the fact that you can just pop any enemy with like a piñata to get health means that like the placement of health and ammo around the map is sort of meaningless. It's, to me at least, in what I've played so far, it's this weird thing where I never felt like I was going to run out of ammo almost ever, because I knew I could always just blow up an enemy with a melee kill and I would get ammo back. And I just wish that the game was this powerful, and I know this is the complaint that you said at the beginning, but I wish the game felt like a powerful shooter all the time, instead of at certain points saying, no, don't shoot those guys, punch them in the face instead. And I just don't like that.
Sure.
I don't like the way it makes me play the game.
Yeah, I think there's legitimate arguments on both sides, and I'm still kind of grappling with it myself. And James, I'll let you dig into it more. But like one of the counters I would say, Tom, is I think there's interesting things about forcing the player into things that they don't want to do, into things that are perhaps more difficult, and you could argue that like getting up close and personal and setting up those kills is perhaps more of a skill shot than just like having a powerful shotgun that eliminates guys at will and makes you feel super good about yourself. Not that that's what you're suggesting necessarily, but it's like, oh shit, like I'm running and I'm evading a guy, I'm at 20 health, I see a guy on my left, okay, if I switch to this gun, I can perhaps, I think I'm in range to stun him, and now I need to lunge in, get the health, and run away quickly before this other guy gets in my back. Like, that's a totally normal scenario in Doom, where you have to, like, I need to do this other thing that I like is a little bit tough at this moment that I'm not set up to do, instead of just eliminate all enemies. You know, it makes the game a little bit more gymnastic, which I like.
Yeah, and I think on the default, like the normal difficulty, I think you're right, Tom, that there's an abundance of resources, and you're not going to, you're never going to feel too strained. As the difficulty gets higher, your health is like, it's like an oscillating pendulum, and getting like, if you know the map, you will probably burn through, and it's a certain, difficult enough fight. It's very easy to burn through everything available out there, and so the glory kills become like especially riskier and especially more important in that regard. And for me, like I didn't ever feel like they were, when I staggered an enemy, to stagger an enemy, I didn't feel like every enemy was just like staggered before death. There were plenty of times where I would just do enough damage to explode them. It's not like that's a default state they have before death, and it didn't really bother me in that sense. And in fact, like there are these runes you can get from challenges hidden throughout the campaign that you can kind of use them to spec towards a style of play that you like. So I really like the glory kills. So I equipped a rune that increased the distance at which I could execute a glory kill. Another one that gave me a speed boost after executing a glory kill. Another one that made the point at which enemies stagger happen sooner. So, and since you speed up to an enemy, like when you're executing a glory kill, I was able to like pop rockets off from across the arena or whatever weapon I chose, stagger a couple enemies, and just shoot between them, like, and just basically fly all over the map in this really like satisfying chain that I set up using skill shots from across the map. So the gunplay was still important to do something cool and skillful, and I think the glory kills were like a fun way to reward that shooting for me. Again, like you said, there's going to be a camp of people who just do not like them, and that think they feel out of place, but I think they definitely have room.
It's almost like people are allowed to have different opinions about games.
What?
Oh my God!
My review's not like the stone tablet that id keeps in their office at all times.
It's not. It's not. One final thing I'll say on the glory kills. I think this is the most, I don't know, just interesting part of the campaign for me, and I think it's going to be the thing that people have the biggest divergent set of opinions on. You can kind of get a sense of the spectrum almost literally we're having here. I'm in the middle, but I do think they feed into the theme that it has gone with, where from the outset, like you say in your review, James, like you're this hyper masculine, just like destroyer, like relentless rage, embodiment of rage. I think you're like putting your thumbs in the eye sockets of one of the enemies, basically, like in the first opening moment. It's a game that wants you to get up close and personal with the enemies, and if you're just sitting back with your rocket launcher plinking people off, like that's not this game. There are plenty other shooters of that style, and this is presenting something where you're putting your hands inside the rib cages and just ripping stuff open, and that's the character you're playing. That's the spirit of this game. It's heavy metal, it's occultism and Satan, and you're just like ripping his guts out like that old Doom comic from the 90s. Rip and tear, go Google Rip and Tear. You'll see what I'm talking about. If
it's great.
That doesn't ring a bell, but and I can get behind that because it also has like a fun sense of humor. It's super over the top.
Oh yeah.
I think like one of the first kills again in the game, and this is like a glory kill you'll see, is you like rip somebody's arm off and you hit him in the head with it. Just that's like an everyday just like thing that's over in half a second. Like, okay, whatever, no big deal.
Yeah, or there's all sorts of stuff like that. So this very clinical way of addressing its violence and its absurdity, where you're in this industrial like futuristic Mars station, and it says demonic invasion in progress in this very like sterile font and this voice repeating it over the intercoms.
Well, let's talk about the other two aspects of Doom, because we stayed on the single player for a while, and I think that's good to talk about. And generally, I think most people, at least in our office, were surprised by how much they've been enjoying the single player, given how much of a letdown the multiplayer beta was a while ago. I mean, we've talked on the show multiple times about how it was like very whatever, It made Doom seem like it wasn't going to be very good in general, and then when we got in, it was like, oh, a lot of the polish is in the single player of this game. But have you jumped back into the multiplayer? I mean, obviously, I assume you have. Like, but has it changed at all from that early opinion, or like?
I didn't play too much of the beta, but in the 7 hours or so of multiplayer, it doesn't feel like the multiplayer has a unique identity in the same way that the single player does. It feels like this weirdly compromised attempt to make an old school shooter, that's based on skill shots, and the shooting itself is the most important thing, shooting and agility. But certainly, there's a bunch of weapons locked behind, the progression in XP and the perks. I forget what they're called right now, but the perks that you get upon respawning sometimes feel a little arbitrary. Some of them randomly grant you more armor when you spawn. Some of them
more speed, or they'll like reveal the cooldowns that are about to go off, like the demon rune, which again like spawns you into one of like 4 possible demons that you again have to unlock through the progression system.
Yeah. And because of that, I don't know, the spirit of old school precision mobility based shooters is in how it's just everyone's on even footing. It's all about your skill set and nothing else. And that's kind of just inherently compromised by blocking anything away, even if it's balanced, so to speak. That even if they have a graph out there that says, no, if you have all these weapons, are there's going to be some imbalance no matter what. And because of that, I couldn't really get into it. It didn't feel distinct or interesting, and I didn't want to return.
Yeah, it's strange. I jumped in last night for a few rounds, and there are new maps in there, of course, and new content, but otherwise it's familiar to what I played in the beta. And it's kind of a shame because the stuff that is tacked on to the Doom multiplayer is so distracting that it like sends these signals that we've seen over the years of like, okay, this is a tacked on mode. This is something that was kind of an afterthought. I think it was developed by an external developer to it itself.
Oh, it feels a lot like that.
And it's a shame because the core of the game and kind of what it inherits from the single player, which is the movement, the weapons, and just the raw agility of pursuing people in a space that has lots of like little terraces you can leap between and clamber on, I think it is pretty fun. It's not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but like what it inherits from the campaign is a good core of ideas, but it's wearing this kind of like cloak of other FPS stuff we've seen. It's just sort of like a grab bag of like, okay, I guess we have to have like customizable armor for some reason, and like sliders to adjust your color and stuff like that. And like, I guess we have to have like Far Cry 3 multiplayer, a post-match screen where you can taunt people and kind of like, do these emotes. I guess we need a progression system because people need a reason to come back. And that in particular, the progression system is totally antithetical to the style of like the history of these games, which is purity.
Yeah.
Think about Quake 3. It's about the purity of mechanics, the intrinsic fun and skill involved in getting a kill. You don't need a pat on your back. You don't need like a guitar riff to play every time you get 3 kills in a row. You know what you did. You know how like tough and like the motor skills that were involved in that. And there's still little traces of that. Like I had this amazing rocket kill at long range where I just happened to connect with somebody. Or you spin around 180 and you time the shotgun blast just right. You swap weapons before the guy you're dealing with does. Those moments like have these little sparks of, oh man, Quake 3, I remember that. Oh man, Doom multiplayer, I remember that. But it's all the kind of stuff that's layered inside of it. Just sort of convinces you, oh man, this game doesn't have its own identity, it doesn't have its own like spirit. It's afraid to be itself, and that's it's just weirdly distracting. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't jumped into the multiplayer yet, just because I haven't felt the desire to. I guess like it just hasn't called to me at all.
Yeah, just as a caveat, I think regardless of its quality, I can like wholly recommend playing it for just the single player campaign. That's what Doom.
Well, let's talk real fast about the last little bit of this too, because that's the bit I was in most often, which is Snap Map, which is the level creator thing. I played about a half hour of the single player, and then I was in Snap Map for probably the next 5 hours of gameplay.
All right.
And Snap Map is extraordinarily disappointing. It's a theme of Doom, I think, that if you don't do the single player, you're gonna be a little let down. Is the vibe I got, and it's weird too. Can we just talk about how strange it is that if you load into the game, it loads you into the single player mode, and if you want to go to the multiplayer or the Snap Map mode, you have to like relaunch the game in a new window or like a new version.
Separate executables.
It's super strange, and they have separate settings files too. So the default key bindings from Snap Map to single player are different.
I found that very unpleasant when I went to the multiplayer and I went to like do my melee thing and it threw out a grenade instead. I was like,
just so strange.
Oh boy,
just so strange.
It's so bizarre.
I don't know why that is. I'm not going to speculate on why that is. It's just weird that it happens. But Snap Map is super strange, and I'd love to hear. Actually, we have somebody in the chat, Pinchy Scree. I know is one of the people who made this new. Ancient Aliens Doom WAD that just came out recently.
Oh, nice.
This incredible, huge Doom WAD for a game that came out 23 years ago and is just like now getting these amazing new mods and maps. And that'll never, ever, ever happen with this Doom, which is a disappointment because it could it's such a pretty game, it's such a robust engine, that the fact that SnapMap is so limited and there's absolutely no mod support means that this game is just going to kind of like live and die by the DLC.
And specifically, it's limited. I mean, you can do some interesting things with SnapMap, and I think we talked about this earlier. It's for console players, which we are not. It's a pretty exciting tool, to extend like the way you play the game, but a lot of those limits carry over to PC. Like, you can only spawn 12 monsters at once. Tom, you were trying to make a MOBA of sorts.
A Doomba.
So sad. I was so trying to make a Doomba, and it just didn't. I got the AI completely working. Like the game's coding version of coding
scripting
is not bad. It's actually pretty complex, and it gives you a lot of tools to work with the AI and stuff, but then the in-engine limitations just cropped up, and you can only make 12 demons on screen at once, or in the map at once, and you can only do a pretty limited amount of modules, and the demons, once they get about 2 long modules away from you, just despawn automatically with no way to change any of that. And that's the sort of stuff that sort of makes sense, because they have to limit those things so that everyone can still run it. It'll still you're not going to load into some SnapMap map and it's going to be this mess that your computer can't handle. Like, that would be a disappointment. But it's also the factors that modders could just change and suit the needs of whatever mod they were making.
Yep.
Yeah, it really raises a lot of questions about what the legacy of this game is going to be. You think about Wolfenstein, beloved campaigns, the Old Blood and whatnot. Maybe a little bit less than the original, the New Order, but like imaginative, like artistically driven campaigns with great storytelling and creativity. But again, John Romero, the creator of Doom, one of the key creators of Doom, released a mod. This got a lot of press earlier this year. A WAD, I should say, not a mod. People played it. So like, even the original creators are still making stuff for Doom 2 decades later. How are we going to feel about this game? And more importantly, perhaps, what is Bethesda going to do in the year plus after launch? You look at Fallout, you look at Skyrim, and they're kind of their strategy for how they iterate on games. You want to say that they're probably going to release kind of like an expansion DLC thing, maybe at $15-$20. That is like a half the size of the Doom campaign, perhaps. But also, you think about Quake. Looking at the presumptive success of Doom, there's a lot of praise certainly circulating about it. I don't know if it's if it's sold enough. We haven't released any figures yet for us to comment on. But you got to think like, okay, if Bethesda isn't doing anything with Doom, that's a mistake. But what if their approach is to make Doom modelable for console users? Console players, because I think SnapMap is a great solution for folks who are playing with a gamepad and want some extra life out of the game. I think that's going to be a cool, surprising thing for them. But what if Quake is heavily moddable? What if that's the direction they take, where they sort of like split the difference and are like, okay, we're not going to make Doom super open, but we're going to like make Quake super. We're going to give you access to the engine and all this stuff, and that's the approach they take. I think that would be weird in some ways and sort of contradictory, but it would make sense in some other ways. So I'm really curious, if we do see a Quake reboot in the next year or two, just what that approach is going to be like.
It'd be super strange to me if they switched gears that much. Like, I understand the idea of that being, different strokes for different folks, kind of specialize the games, but I feel like this is just them trying to make it more mainstream and more easily accessible to those console users, and I can't see them switching gears like that. I mean, it's fair to bring up the Unreal Tournament, the newest one, which is already, it's already in free pre-alpha, whatever the heck they're calling it. You can download the Unreal launcher and just play the new Unreal Tournament right now, and they have the Unreal editor built into it, and you can just start making maps and levels for that. And it's crazy to look at SnapMap and then look at what Unreal is doing with the new Unreal Tournament, and just it's not even comparable. It's embarrassing almost.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to remember that UT, this new UT is essentially I don't want to. This isn't cynical, but it's like a marketing vehicle for getting people excited about creating content for Unreal 4 and working in Unreal 4, so that hopefully people will start making their own games in Unreal 4, and as they get more familiar with it.
Yeah.
And it's a super clever thing to do, and we like the new UT, but yeah, I mean, it does certainly feel uncomfortable. And Tom, I don't think you've mentioned yet. Like, you wrote an article to this effect on the site that's up there right now about Snap Map and why it's a little bit disappointing. Like, as PC gamers, certainly we are disappointed that this classic game. One thing I'll mention, like, I don't know if you've heard of Batman Doom, which I think released in the early 2000s or something. So Batman Doom is like a full conversion of Doom where you're throwing batarangs and stuff, and there's, you know, Joker and whatnot. It was made by Ace Team. So Ace Team, the creators of Xenoclash and other like super crazy irreverent games, they made it like this amazing full conversion of Doom that you should absolutely go play. But in a way, like that was like an informative experience for them to how to build games. It was a training tool for them and so many other developers. You know, if anything, it's a little bit disappointing because we're running out of like these fully modelable experiences for people to kind of grow up on. You know, teenagers and even people who are younger than teenagers to tinker with and get excited about game development and see what they can do.
Yeah, and I mean, for me, the biggest takeaway is that the gunplay in Doom is so refreshing and fun that I would hate for it to be limited to, you know, the campaign, which is great, and just kind of a series of the same corridors connected over and over with, you know, minor differences. I want to see, you know, maybe like a modern interpretation of Batman Doom or like Chex Quest or whatever the hell people are coming up with. It just seems like a perfect vehicle for a fun way to, you know, make silly or, you know, interesting conversions of that kind of shooting in a bunch of different ways. And
yeah.
It's just a disappointing, like you were saying, it's a disappointing continuation in a legacy that is like of a game series that has a legacy so rich in modding. You know, Bethesda wasn't obligated, and id wasn't obligated to make this Doom mod friendly. You know, it just feels like such a missed opportunity not to. It feels like such a missed opportunity, and it's disappointing. SnapMap isn't a terrible kind of console band-aid for that sort of stuff, but it's not. It's awful compared to mods, you know, and it's just disappointing. But let's open it up to questions from you guys in Twitch chat. If you have any questions for us, tag us with @PCGamer in the Twitch chat. Anything about this week in PC gaming, anything on your mind, if you want to talk about Doom, Stellaris, any of the other topics, or anything else, let us know. And if you are watching on YouTube after the fact or listening on iTunes or at pcgamer.com/podcast, welcome. You are always can join us on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. at twitch.tv/PCGamer, and we'll take your questions live.
I'm going to add, Tom, what a hell of a month May is going to end up being.
Yeah.
I mean, we've covered a good amount of it, but I'm just going to recap here. Doom, Stellaris, Overwatch, Total War Warhammer. On the last day of the month, we're going to get the Witcher 3 Blood and Wine DLC.
Party expansion, yeah.
So that's going to be big. I shouldn't call it DLC, excuse me. But also, hey, Dawn of War 3 got announced this month.
Yep.
Hey, Civ 6 got announced this month. What am I missing? Oh, right, the GTX 1080, which you guys were talking about last week. Like, holy hell.
Yeah.
Like, what a bounty of stuff. Really curious to see what's going to happen at E3 as well.
Yeah,
but,
right around the corner.
Yeah, Battleborn came out this month, which is not a bad game.
No.
I mean, we may not heavily recommend it, but, you know, a lot of people enjoying that as well. So, damn, it feels good to be a PC gamer.
Oh, so good. So good.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. It's gonna be good going into the summer. There's gonna be a lot of games to play to catch up on this summer. All right.
Yeah, Battlefield 1 too.
There you
go. Oh, yeah.
Multi-platform, but hey.
Jarn Barnes asks, how much does SnapMap Map Maker make when a maker makes a SnapMap map? Oh man, that was tough. I was not prepared to read that.
Does not compute. I mean, well done for not stumbling.
Yes.
I stumbled a little. All right, let's go back to some more questions that aren't going to break my tongue on the way.
It's a tongue breaker.
Okay, so now the question's easy to read, but the name I can't do. I'm going to try this. It's going to be bastardized. Russell Duhel grind? Race Duhel grind?
tried, Tom.
Anyway, thoughts on the new Rainbow Six Siege map and operators? Evan, you kind of drifted away from Siege recently, haven't you?
I put 150 hours in that game. I haven't touched it yet. I'm really sorry. I wish I could offer something more. I thought it was funny that they decided to call it Operation Dust when there's so many comparisons to Counter-Strike with Rainbow Six. Yeah. On paper, God, I'm trying to remember, like one of the operators has like cameras they can place anywhere. I think that's a super welcome mechanics for sort of injecting some new like meta changes essentially to existing maps, because you have to account for the possibility that cameras can kind of be anywhere now. That's big change. I know they nerfed like the Super 90 from Frost and her Nitro Cell. So if anything, I was like super positive about, holy shit, Ubisoft are supporting the hell out of this game. There's, Steam concurrents usually hover around like 12 or 13,000 for Rainbow Six, which is not low, but is not like in the top 10.
Right.
So it's not exploding, but they're really seemingly like super committed. If you go to the, if you just Google the Operation Dust kind of like release page they have for that game, it's like one of the longest. It's like comparable with Dota 2's big announcement this week in terms of like a promotional page, tons of fixes. So I'm just super happy to see that game getting a lot of attention. I mean, obviously, like they committed to a certain number of season pass releases and they're fulfilling that, but I'm happy to see the biggest game company in the world supporting a like multiplayer only shooter that is with a big competitive focus. And I just hope it continues to get attention and players, because the game deserves it. It's not perfect, but it's a fabulous kind of distinct game from Counter-Strike. It's a little bit slower. You have time to think and breathe and plot. Destructibility is fabulous. So please more. Yeah.
All right, we have Wetwag asking, do y'all like Salt and Sanctuary? And I'll drop the Steam link into that.
I want to play it real bad.
Yeah, it came out yesterday. It's kind of it's so easy to make this comparison, but Dark Souls-like in 2D.
Well, it's deliberately
Dark
Souls-like. Wears that on its sleeve. It is an ode to those games, 100%. I've been following this game for a while. It's by the folks Ska Studios, who
I think they're Canadian.
Yeah, and they did. I'm forgetting Dishwasher.
Right.
That quick action game, a la 2D action game, a la like Devil May Cry, and this is their attempt at Dark Souls-esque gameplay in a 2D plane. So.
It looks really cool. I don't think any of us have had a chance to play it yet because it came out yesterday.
Came out. I definitely will give it a shot, though.
I'm very excited to do so.
I've heard good things. It's been out on PlayStation 4 for a while and it got pretty solid reception.
That guy is like a chandelier for swords inside his body. That was a little bit scary. Man,
what a description. Yeah, no, it looks cool, though. I think hopefully we'll be talking about it on the show later.
Yeah, I think watching this footage, the main thing I'm curious about is how, in the absence of 3D space, how is dodging and blocking handled in a way that is interesting? Because obviously, when you're rolling left or right, there's a lot more nuance and like different weapon patterns and swings that you can do. But if it's just like things are coming down at you or forward, then
where's the nuance?
But it looks great just watching the trailer right there.
Let's see. Luca asks, how super hyped are you guys for Overwatch? It's weird because I've been playing a ton of Overwatch in the beta, so I'm hyped for it, but I'm mainly just hyped for it so that I can play it with other people who weren't in the beta. Like a lot of my friends were not in the beta, and I wanted to play that game with them.
I mean, for me, it's going to be that. It can't not be that kind of experience for where. I think Left 4 Dead 2 is probably the last time this happened for me. Maybe Diablo, I'm trying to think, where it's just like everybody is playing that game, and you have this immense peer pressure to get in there, that even if it's kind of implicit, and you get that shared experience of like what happened in our Overwatch match last night, and you're kind of, people are talking about it on Twitter. I mean, at least that's like a big part of my experience, or like they're sharing videos and scoreboard screenshots and stuff like that. And it's a feeling of like phenomenon, frankly. I feel like I'm just caught up in the hype or something. Because I'm not actually like super up on Overwatch. I think there's some things I don't like about it at all, frankly. But I'm gonna love that experience of sort of getting the band back together. A lot of like our old TF2 comrades and stuff. We used to like be in there every night in like 2009. I'm looking forward to reuniting with those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too. I'm excited to finally keep my progression and get some cool ass skins and not have them taken away. So, and I'm also just excited to play the game. I'm not very good at competitive shooters, but it seems to have a whole bunch of different characters and different ways to play that I can excel at. I love being medics and support, so pretty jacked.
All right, we'll take a couple more. Real quickly, Dowie asks any news on the RSS feed. If anybody is waiting for the RSS feed to come back up, progress is being made. We're hoping to have that back up by sometime next week. Sorry about that again. We made some back-end changes to the site, broke a few things. We're working it out. The Prime Willis, a subscriber, asks, I've been wanting to ask this for a while. What are the chances of getting another Showdown LAN? Which is something I think PC Gamer did a while ago, right? The odds are who knows, but also we did the PC Gamer Weekender in the UK. Oh my goodness, last winter time, right?
February, March, yeah.
Yeah. And that was, people seemed to really, really like that, and I think we all like the idea of doing like a US one if there's interest in it. So make your voice heard, man.
Yeah, we're definitely increasing our focus on events. And again, this is like a LAN party that we threw back in 07, 08, I believe, in a few different places across the US. But events are a super time-consuming and expensive thing to put on. So I think like we have to know that people will show up, and
that's usually a good thing to have.
Yeah.
And like where do you go? Like it's like seemingly every location you pick, like Los Angeles, well, the public transportation is like super bad and the venues are more expensive. But if you go to the Midwest, there's fewer people. So yeah, we'll figure it out. I think like we definitely want to do more direct engagement with our community. But hey, also we're putting on our second annual PC gaming show at E3 next month, Monday, June 13th. If you missed that last year, we basically put on a PC gaming press conference at E3. So look forward to that on Twitch.
It's a good time.
PCGamingShow.com if you want some more information. But we're definitely looking into this stuff and exploring these kind of projects alongside making a magazine, making a website, making this podcast.
It's a lot of stuff.
Raising a family of goats as I am in Stardew Valley. Lots to do.
Whose goat day is it? Is it my goat day?
It is.
Okay.
Please milk the goat.
Okay.
Final question from subscriber JBJ Blaze. Do you ever think Overwatch with this awesome multiplayer will ever dare to have a single-player campaign? So I was talking about this on Monday, was it? That the way Blizzard has been talking about Overwatch is no, Overwatch will never have a single-player campaign. It will always be a multiplayer thing. But they've been talking about the Overwatch universe as a franchise. So every time I've said, why not single player in Overwatch, they're always like, maybe for another game in the Overwatch franchise, So I think, obviously, they haven't announced anything, and there are probably not any plans because Overwatch hasn't even come out yet.
Yeah.
But I would be surprised if they've started developing anything beyond the Overwatch that's coming out next week. But I think the mentality that they have is, if people like the Overwatch universe, if this game is successful and people are still playing it in a year or two, maybe we can start thinking about what else we do with this universe and this franchise, because Blizzard's always been a universe company.
I think a PvE mode is much more likely. I mean, again, the TF2 comparison, if you play TF2, you know about the MVM mode, man versus machine, which is a wave-based survival mode, basically. Tons of people just play that in TF2, and it's a great way of sort of getting extra life out of your existing assets. You can use some of the same props, some of the same map components, and then, obviously you need to build AI scripting, which is a huge thing in and of itself. But if it's wave-based, maybe that's simpler. Yeah, I think that would be a more natural thing that we might see in, who knows, like a year or two from now, just to extend the life of the game. But yeah, just in general, obviously, one point of distinction between Overwatch and TF2, Blizzard's pushing esports out of the gate in like the competitive mode. TF2 is like just about to get a legit competitive mode, and matchmaking is kind of what I'm talking about pretty soon. So that's kind of going to separate them. I mean, Overwatch is a competitive game from the outset. It's not launching with rank play, which is interesting. They're going to add that later on.
Yeah.
But TF2, in its infancy and even like the first like 5 years of its lifespan, it was like this game that you kind of hang out in, and it's a very competitive game. But ultimately, it was like you hang out in a server with your buddies and you kind of crack jokes, and like the minutes are 25 minutes long as opposed to like 6 or 7 in Overwatch, I think.
Yeah, it's much quicker. Well, I think either way, it's pretty unlikely in my mind that we will never see some sort of single player or co-op thing in the Overwatch universe. Whether that's years and years down the line or a different game or whatever, I think eventually that'll happen. It's just it's too early to say.
And again, look at how games like Diablo 3 have evolved. I mean, you have to look at, and Blizzard is a very consistent company in what they do. They apply lots of similar ideas, even across very different games. I would say Valve does some of the same things. But look at Diablo 3. I think look at what they're doing with Heroes of the Storm, which is about a year old now. And I think that'll kind of inform your sense of how this game might evolve, even though it's a very different genre.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. You can always come back next week, every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific time on twitch.tv/PCGamer. You can also find all of our previous episodes at youtube.com/PCGamer. And if you ever want to leave us a comment, tell us if you like us, you don't like us, any good or bad things, we would love to hear it. If you go to PCGamer.com/podcast, click on this week's post and leave us in the comments below. But thank you very much, and thank you guys for joining me as usual.
Of course.
Let's go kill some more demons.
Let's go rip and tear.
And
Rip and tear.
We'll see you guys next week.